Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if there's no one else, let me close the public portion. A number of questions have been raised about the drainage and the individual plot plans and so on. Does anybody want to tackle those?
Drainage was a very big concern of staff. Right now, the property drains from the street back to the houses on Riverside. So we were very concerned about doing something with the drainage. One of the concerns we had, and we've done dry wells in the past on similar situations, with the relatively poor soils in Princeton, how well they function is marginal. They do something, they do work to an extent, but the concern is on a heavy rain, the water will continue right back to the houses behind this. They really do nothing in a heavy rain. So we were concerned as far as getting as much of the impervious surface from these three houses into the storm sewer. And I know there's the argument that the storm sewer drains to the stream and the stream, potentially ultimately overflows. They have reduced the impervious coverage. They are under the ordinance requirement for impervious coverage. So we felt that at least getting the roof leaders tied in was a dramatic improvement. We look at the grading to make sure that it's not impacting either neighbor to the side. The one neighbor to the left, actually, I believe their property is, I don't have a lot of topo on their property, but it's actually a little bit higher than this property. But we make sure that the water from this is not going to drain onto the adjacent properties wherever possible. Obviously, we can't stop it all from going to the back, so we try to minimize that as much as possible.
Jerry?
Jack or Derek, when do plot plans have to be submitted?
When they submit building plans, they'll have to submit the engineering plan with all the stormwater as well as the building plans to verify the FAR, the setbacks and parking, those type of issues.
When you say dry well, it seems like in other applications we've required, I don't know what it's called, but by a dry well, do you mean like a hole in the ground that's filled up with rocks that the water goes in?
Correct.
Is there another word for that? A detention basin? It's not a detention basin?
Well, a detention basin is actually, that's where you have a big hole, you dig, it fills up with water, you let the water drain out over time. We typically don't do that on smaller subdivisions.
That works better.
Well, the water still will drain to the houses in the back. It just detains it. So instead of it all rushing there at one time, it'll be released over several hours.
I'd sort of like to make a comment about this because I think really the trade-off, the PEC comment about maintaining the water on site is desirable from a larger ecosystem standpoint. It helps with the preventing pollution of our waterways and so on and so forth. So really what we're talking about here is a trade-off, the neighbors versus the larger environment. This plan is far better for the neighbors than any plan you could do that would keep the water on the site and try to manage it on the site. And so I think that's the trade-off, and that's where the engineering department came down on trying to favor the neighbors.
Excuse me. So I was just curious, that calculation for the current, or I guess, pre-demolition impervious surface, does that include the giant driveway in the back? Because I just looked at the previous plan, and there's a large area in the back that's just driveway, which is pretty much the footprint of the existing house.
That's why there's a reduction, because that's such a large, obviously the three houses is bigger, but because it had such a large driveway on the one house, that's where they got the reduction.
So I'm curious, if you compare the previous footprints of the house to the proposed footprints of the house, is there actually a reduction, or is
No, there'd be an increase.
Yeah. So.
I don't know what the percentage would be, but there would be an increase.
Well, so as I forget who mentioned that that we've been having this conversation in our town. I don't know if the applicants are aware of this, that the town is undergoing a whole study about neighborhood character, and we're addressing the issue of garages, and there's pretty much consensus that we don't want garages in the front, but we haven't passed the ordinance yet. But I just want to make you aware of that and ask if you'd consider changing your design, because it's inhospitable. I mean, it's just not as friendly to have the garages in the front. And then the same with the prevailing setback. So we did pass that ordinance because putting the houses, in a line similar to the other houses makes the neighborhood look nicer for everyone. So I don't know how set in stone this is, or if we could require those things, since this is an application.
I would especially like to second the notion of, if you could look again at the prevailing setback, especially on the two lots that have parallel side lot lines, because there's really, the only reason that you wouldn't push those houses back a little bit is because you're going to have a little bit more impervious coverage with a longer driveway. But I think it would be a nice gesture to the neighbors and to the character of the neighborhood to have those two houses at least. I know that with the triangular lot, it's hard to push that house back because the lot's getting narrower and you have issues of your lot width line. But I would be interested to have the applicant respond to that as a suggestion.
I'd second also Jenny's comments about the front-facing garage on the one plan. It seems to me that changes the character considerably, and if there's any flexibility from a design standpoint to not have that garage, had the ordinance passed in December, that design would not be permissible. And obviously, you're working with the ordinances as they existed at the time of application, but if there's some flexibility there, I'd like to, so I'm seconding Jenny's part about the garages, whereas David's talking about the setback. So is there any flexibility there?
Well, to talk about the setbacks, as Mr. West said earlier, this lot drops 9 feet front to back. So we're attempting to get all of the roof leaders and the impervious into the storm sewer, which is very up at the very front. So the further back the houses go, the less likely it is that we'd be able to pipe those roof leaders to the front. We would just run out of cover. So that's part of why they're as tight as they are to the front.
If your driveways were a little longer, but they were permeable pavement, you could manage a gigantic amount of stormwater that way, keep it off the neighbor's yard and out of the storm sewer.
Well, you need permeable subsoil for that to work. If the water runs through the pavement and it's 6 inches below the pavement, in the winter, you won't have a driveway anymore. So these soils are not really good they don't infiltrate well.
Well, they can infiltrate sideways as well as down. There are lots of ways to get water back into the ground, even if soils are sort of lousy. And
I don't
respectfully
know
take issue that it's not an either flood the neighbors or flood Manville kind of thing. There are lots and lots of different green infrastructure practices, some of them manufactured treatment devices and some of them pure green, non-structural. And you're an engineer and I'm not. I realize I'm probably stomping on shaky ground, but I hope, I guess sometime soon we're going to hear more about potential changes to the stormwater ordinance, so maybe the horse is out of the barn on this particular matter, but we can maybe learn at that point more about how to address problem spots, because I understand there are a lot of them around town. And are these houses already sold, or are they being built on spec?
My understanding is
Spec?
spec.
So
yes.
the design could hypothetically change. And I too would very much like to see them back toward where the existing setback, prevailing setback is, and much more in keeping with the neighborhood
Right.
character. Also,
Well-
there is, while I'm talking, there's a very large oak tree close to Ms. Stein's house that is, it's tree number 522, I think. It's a 3-foot diameter oak tree that's slated for the axe. And I would hope very much that, I know it's not just about one tree, but that one tree probably absorbs a gigantic amount of water and gets a good bit of it back into the air, and hopefully it could be, oh, I'm sorry, it's that, I'm talking about 507. Tree 507, which is close to, which is right along that sort of diagonal line on the thing.
While we're talking about trees, could I ask, there was a question of whether or not that the replacement trees would be quite small or substantial, or Mr. West, do you have a comment on
Replacement
that?
trees will be 2.5-inch caliper. With the new shade tree ordinance, actually, there's going to be, instead of the 30 trees that there's going to be 34 proposed. What they do is it increases the number required as the diameter of the existing tree. So it's actually more replacement trees than there are there than they're taking down.
But they're,
But they're 2.5-inch caliper.
and how,
Can we require bigger ones because they're, instead of the baby ones, is that what you're saying?
well, I just wondered, you know, it isn't just the caliper, it's the height as they go in. I think that's one of the things that bothers people, that they miss the canopy effect. It takes quite a while.
Yes, you're definitely not going to get the canopy effect. I mean, they're going to be probably 12 to 15 feet tall, but obviously that's nothing compared to a 40 or 50-foot tree.
I'm afraid the public portion of the meeting is finished. Yes, Jerry?
Could you comment on the front-facing garages? Jenny brought that up, and is it not feasible to have the garages facing on the side?
We have just the one on the end lot, which is constrained by the lot width measurement.
So it cannot be designed to face on the side?
It's not really a feasible alternative. You know, we've got it set up to use the existing driveway.
And the curb
I-
cut.
I mean, the ordinance was not to entirely eliminate front-facing garages, but to not have them project past the main facade of the house. And I do think that, you know, if you wanted to redesign that one unit so that it was not a projecting garage, there wouldn't be any reason why you couldn't do that.
Mr. Burton says we could look at possibly shifting the facade to push it back.
If,
Yes,
jump
Mr.
in,
Sola.
if you're going to require something, you should require it. It's not look-in. You need to be clear because staff doesn't want to be in the position of having to interpret what the board said. If you're going to ask the applicant or require the applicant to do something, we should require it, realizing that the plans comply with the ordinance. The prevailing setback, remember, as originally proposed or as adopted, doesn't require that you do that. It allows you to do that, and we may want to rethink that as well. There was a lot of discussion whether we were requiring it or not. It does not require the prevailing setback. It just allows the property owner to decide whether or not they're going to take advantage of that. So that's something we may want to revisit, but I just wanted to caution the board, if these are things you want, then you have to put them in as a condition. I'll defer to Jerry whether or not they're legal conditions, but we would caution you to don't. It was like when we were getting into, well, what's your analysis of what's economically viable for the green building? Typically, we don't see that. They're not coming back to us with a study to say what was economically viable. Either you're requiring it and the applicant's agreeing to it, or they're not. And again, a lot of what goes inside the house is not typically what we are regulating, but I think as PEC has done and as we've done with our green building checklist, a lot of this is just to raise awareness and have, I think it was David that suggested, or maybe it was Louise, that the buyer beware that you can have these things. And it's an educational process, but I would, again, stress so that as we do the record, if you're asking them to change the garage or the location of the garage, that needs to be clear.
Okay.
I mean, my sense is that we realize that those conditions we cannot, are conditions we can't impose legally. I think we're approaching them in a similar way that the professionals make recommendations, and hope that the applicants will agree to comply with the recommendations.
Right,
I'm making recommendations, and I'm hoping that the applicant will comply.
And I understood that. I just wanted to make certain we knew at some point we have to either it's a yes or no.
Yeah, if I may, the board's authority is very constrained when it's an application that meets all the standards. You can nevertheless impose reasonable conditions. I think it's one thing to talk about the setback for the two lots on the two houses on the rectangular lots, and Mr. Ghazzali has explained that really creates problems from a discharge of stormwater. With respect to the house closest to Riverside School, going that way, where the garage is in the front, it seems to me that the board would have the power to impose a condition that says the garage should not be projected out in front of the facade of the building. In fact, it should be set back behind the facade of the building, because I think the point that was made by members of the public that it would have a negative impact on the neighborhood is a reasonable one, and I just don't see I don't see the imposition of a huge burden upon the applicant by requiring that.
Yeah, I suggest we require that.
Yeah, I would make it a condition for approval.
While we're talking actual conditions, were there any other things that you tentatively put forward that you think should be conditions, or
I would
do you want to
say-
move them from suggestion to condition, let's say?
So these are conditions that we're making or
So we're
suggesting?
talking about conditions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that at the PUC, we discussed making conditions about green infrastructure. You know, I understand that some soils might not be suitable, but I think that based off of this, increase, which I think is really an increase in pervious surface, I really think that there needs to be strong consideration for green infrastructure.
What specific, I mean, do you want to,
like rain gardens or bioswales?
I mean, should we then
bioswales.
suggest specific ones right now? I mean, do you want to, because we can't, do you want to be specific?
Well, I mean, I don't know if we should, I mean, we could be very specific, but I mean, I think in terms of the area, but I think that based off of maybe the proposed stormwater management ordinance or the new regulations.
Are you suggesting this in addition to the storm sewer connection, or?
Yes, that's what I'm suggesting.
So,
I'm just trying to figure out how we would say it. I mean, exactly what you're saying. Like, do you want to make a proposal?
yeah,
Did someone else want to chime in?
I have a
Miss-
suggestion, because, you know, the Clean Water Act and DEP rules and the town's MS4 permit, which comes from DEP, require that green infrastructure be used to the maximum extent practicable on every major project. And the town is contemplating applying it to major and minor, but this is a major subdivision. So I think it's incumbent on the applicant to show that they have done that, that they have made use of it to the maximum extent practicable. And I understand that that's, well, that's what I would recommend.
Mr. Quinn?
So I think we've identified one part of the site as having especially bad drainage on the triangular part. Is that, am I remembering this correct? The front of the new triangular lot is an area of concern for drainage? Is
No,
that
the
correct?
entire parcel, because the entire parcel drains from front to back. There's not one lot that's worse than another.
So, in addition to tying into the sewer, then that would certainly be a place where rain gardens would help, I would think, in addition to, correct?
Yeah.
He said, looking at Tina.
I mean, I think that, well, if the gutters are tied to the sewer, then you obviously can't capture it, although you could detach it into rain barrels or, you know, divert it into a rain garden. But, you know, in terms of the driveway, you know, that's a substantial amount of impervious surface that could be diverted into a rain garden or bioswale. So that's what I would suggest.
I
I think that's just unnecessary. You know, we're putting in 400 feet of storm sewer, tearing up the road in an effort to make the overall runoff much better by bringing the roof leaders and tying it into the municipal system. The soils won't support infiltration devices out here. I think, I think we're going in the wrong direction. You know, it's great if you have permeable soils. Sure, let's put it all in the ground. I mean, that's the cheapest thing you could possibly do. But, you know, the applicant has agreed to put in 400 feet of sewer, pipe these roof leaders out, direct the driveways out to the street. We've got virtually no runoff directed to any neighbors. Any of these rain gardens, once they fail, that water's going in the back where it always went. And,
Yeah, I really want to support what Bob is saying there. I've actually, you know, gone through the Rutgers Rain Garden Design Workshop myself, and every rain garden is designed for overflow in the event of an extreme event, an extreme rain event. So essentially what we're saying is that maybe 90% or 95% of the time this is going to be a good solution, but 5% of the time, which is what the neighbors have come to express concern about, we're going to be making their problems worse by requiring these rain gardens. And I think that, you know, it's, based on the feedback from both the professional engineer and from the applicant's engineer, I don't think it's a right condition to be putting on this application.
Ms. Solomon?
I agree. I think we've got professional engineers and we should take their advice. I'm sympathetic with all the people who have environmental concerns, but at this point, I think that the professionals are worth listening to, and I think that the solution they have proposed clearly is the sort of optimum sensible solution for this site. I have to say that there's practically nothing about this application I like, and if it had come along 6 months later, one, you wouldn't have been able to build that house on that lot. According to the Environmental Commission report, the prevailing setback, which is 500 feet on both sides, is, according to the ordinance, is 75 feet. And these are houses have a setback of 25 to 35 feet. So it's a huge difference. They're huge houses. None of it am I happy about, but I do recognize that when we have zoning, an applicant who designs a site plan with the zoning in mind has the right to assume that we're going to uphold the zoning, whether we like it or not, whether we think the zoning was correct whether we're trying to correct the zoning. And that's how it goes, folks. I am very sympathetic with the neighborhood design criteria, but this application came in before we were able to achieve any of that. And I don't see that we would be on solid grounds by wholeheartedly rejecting it. I do think that if we can make a good argument for the front-facing garage and its relative proportion to the front, or whether it should set back a little bit from the front door, that would go a long way to making me feel a little bit better about this application.
Madam Chair, could I make one suggestion?
Yes, go ahead.
Now, or perhaps,
Carefully.
And then you have
yeah, we saw what happened last time I did that. If I could make one suggestion, whether now or after another comment or two, maybe take a recess for a couple of minutes and we can discuss some of the points made by Ms. Ullman.
The other thing I wanted to ask the board is that we've heard about trees cut down and so on, and I wondered if you wanted to have the landscape subcommittee work with the engineering department at the point at which the landscaping is going to be put in. I think that there will be light in unusual places shining out into the neighboring properties and so on, so maybe we just want to check on that. Is that agreeable, Mr. West?
Either that, or I could work with the municipal arborist, but the landscape subcommittee would be fine.
Yes.
Just one last question before we break about the heights of the houses. So I know the ordinance has a maximum height of, 35 feet? No. Oh, so how high are these houses? And I'm just trying to get a sense, again, very concerned about the neighborhood character and how they fit in with the rest of the houses, and basically how high these houses will be.
The houses to the ridge are approximately 32 feet.
All right. We've been asked for a break. We're about halfway through the meeting, so let's make it no more than 10 minutes, okay? Just
Right. When, nothing in between. Yeah. Right. So we're next. Okay. Thank you.
Clock started ticking years ago.
No, I'm not.
Cut you off in 10 minutes.
Yeah, excuse me. Yeah, I think probably the protocol is such that we should be.
I think we better get back in action.
We're trying to.
Okay.
Trying. We really are trying.
I could offer something.
But we think
What I hate is this bigger and more aggressive. I'm really. We're gonna have to.
I just had a thought of what I said. Huh?
Their offers.
I don't know. But we think okay, fine.
Students who haven't even finished their PhD and have offers of full professorship. They really come in, they come in so well prepared. They're so bright.
Yeah, it's a,
Really, really.
yeah, it's
Evergreen. Read it in the Guardian. Is that right? I believe in global warming. Robert keeps saying, I believe in that more than anything.
You know, it's funny, but as an attorney, like whenever I go to hearings or mostly
We
hearings,
can get them to come back. We've got to move along. We've got other things.
about 65 they talk about it as irrelevant. Like judges are giving by law certain things
Oh.
just for considered by either black lady or case law that consider these things. So a lot of people come with emotion, the concept of morality, etc. And they'll speak about things. But about 7, I say about 65, 70%
There's
is
an
completely
objector.
irrelevant to the judge's decision.
There's an objector.
I don't know if you heard.
They thought that this little sliver of land was a public access to the lake. And
It's a reason to turn
it
the
had
here.
easements on it. I went back, I even looked at the Superior Court case.
You know,
Point.
and that's why issue of access. Okay, like I don't know. It seems like
No,
the universe of what I should be talking about is actually narrow.
Not because it was a
than everything else talking about. So I don't know.
Gone to by the developer. And he paid the taxes, and it went into a tax sale, and one of the property owners bought it. And one of the property owners of Phillip Drive.
Right.
And it went with that lot for a while, and these people bought the lot on Phillip Drive with this strip attached to it. And then when the lease was down, which was next lot, they saw they could buy a much bigger lot. And if they detached this strip from the Phillip Drive house and added it, they'd get a much bigger FAR. Does that make sense? Anyway, we've had this thing of these people going round and round saying that they, it's got to have all these uses.
Gail and I are usually on the same page. Usually she says that that's exactly what I'm thinking. I know between her and Mildred, I say the two most closest. Well, they even to her.
The little house.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I don't know who the objector is. Lee told me which house it was. He didn't tell me which. But we've had more go round on stupid. Anyway, I mean, it would make a nice public access to the lake, but so on. Yeah, I know. Lee, do you think? I think we need to. Ready? Yes. Okay. Okay, if we could come back into session now. Mr. Solo, did you want to say something?
Thank you. It was pointed out to me in terms of the prevailing setback, which doesn't apply here but will in the future. It is a shall, so that it is not an option. I think it was before it was an option. Now it is not. So I wanted to clarify that. I had a discussion with one of the neighbors who was able to pull it up online and then confer with Derek that it is a shall.
Okay, thank you very much. So you've had time to confer and to...
Yeah, what we're proposing is and I forget what lot it is, I think like 3. For 46.01, we take the garage and move it back. I'm not sure how many feet that would be if we could anticipate it. So it's basically the house.
So the thought is that the plane of the garage would be in line with the plane of the house proper, okay? The doors would still face the street, and this is driven by impervious and disturbance, but we would push the garage back.
Sounds good.
Wonderful.
Any other changes or corrections? No, that's it.
Yes.
Did everyone get that? Okay. Any other points? Jenny?
I would like to just put on the table requiring the prevailing setback that the houses conform to the prevailing setback? The reason is, we're here for, why are we having this application if we can't protect the neighborhood? I think the setback is really causing a really bad effect on the neighborhood. And I don't understand why we spend all our time up here if we can't improve, we can't prevent something. It's not that hard to prevent by just requiring that they adhere to the prevailing setback. So I'd like to put on that on the table.
Anyone? Mildred?
I think it's one thing to ask the applicant to consider that, but because there are no variances being requested, and because the ordinance that might dictate a setback isn't one that we're entertaining tonight, it certainly isn't in existence tonight, that as much as I would be willing to do is ask them to consider but not require.
You realize that we're taking an application that has no variances and looking for there to be multiple variances.
But we're being asked to approve this application, so
If I may, as I indicated earlier, I think the board does have some authority to impose reasonable conditions, certainly not as extensive as when you have a variance. And for example, for the garage, I thought that was something the board did have the power to do because it didn't seem to be any burden upon the applicant. But I think the prevailing setback is a different issue. As I understand it, if you push the houses back, then you really start, that has real implications for how you're going to handle stormwater management. And correct me if I'm wrong on that. But if that's right, it seems to me it would really be a stretch for the board to view the board as having the power to require that prevailing setback in these circumstances. It's a stretch in any event, especially when you have an ordinance which deals with this, but which does not apply. But I think here it's a difficult one.
it's just making the pipes longer. That's not,
No, Jenny, the concern is that the pitch on the pipes
Okay.
won't give you positive drainage. However, on the other side, I do think there would be creative ways to, by oversizing the gutters a bit, not the downspouts, the gutters, you could actually carry water from the rear of the house towards the front of the house before you had a downspout. And that might enable them to bring the downspout close enough to the road to get the positive drainage that they need. So, without going through the whole design exercise myself, I don't know whether that's true or not, but I do think that some creative thinking about how the rainwater is brought down from the house might enable them to move the houses back somewhat. Maybe it's only 10 feet.
Well, also, we don't have to, why are we weighing the drainage over the aesthetics? I don't know that that's a no-brainer. It certainly isn't for me.
Well, I think there are a lot of people in Princeton who would weigh the drainage very heavily against the aesthetics, especially the lady who had the 3 feet of water in her cellar.
I don't, but
What we're weighing is what our zoning says they may do. And you may not like it, but that's what the zoning says they may do.
well, I think that
You can talk them out of it, but if you do require or ask them to go back 75 feet, they're not going to be able to put that third house in. So I think, their plan went with the existing zoning. We don't happen to like it, but I don't think we can simply arbitrarily, probably illegally, say you can't do that.
One of the problems, Jenny, is that all of these corrections we're trying to make each one of these applications a learning process for us. We're learning what we should do and what we shouldn't do and what has to be in the ordinance, but we're not at that point yet.
right, but I think maybe we're erring on the side of too much caution and saying, what is the purpose of these meetings? I mean, these hearings, when we're here to look at the application, and aren't we weighing whether it has a good effect or a bad effect on the neighborhood, and if we think that it's going to destroy the character of the neighborhood, don't we have an obligation to do something about it? I mean, I think that's, you know what's going to happen when they go up. They're going to look terrible. And it's happened to us before. So don't we have an obligation?
And these issues are actually intertwined in a way, because the concern of the Environmental Commission to keep the stormwater on site might actually be enhanced by pushing these houses back. So maybe not 100% of the water from the house is piped into the storm drain. Maybe 70% is, and 30% is kept on site in a dry well, in rain gardens, whatever, so it's not just aesthetics versus stormwater. Let's factor in the environmental consideration as well.
Yes.
Can I make
Mr.
a
Gazelle?
suggestion?
Sorry.
Would it be possible to perhaps have the applicants, or ask the applicant to maybe move some of the buildings back without the, prevailing setback, even though, I mean, since we don't have, right to use the prevailing setback, can we just make a request that, the applicant push some of the homes, or one of the homes, back in order to not have these homes be right on the street? Is that fair?
What's your reaction to that? And Mr. Cohen's suggestion that perhaps you can move it back somewhat, not the full 75 feet, but enough where you can locate the houses so that most of the stormwater is going to be discharged by gravity into the line that you're building, but perhaps some of it would remain on site and be treated with rain gardens, or even have a further discussion with staff or others.
All right. I'm just not in favor of the on-site infiltration. If you get repeated storms and you don't have any permeability, whatever you put in there is holding the water, and it's just waiting for the next storm, and it's got half the volume it had for the first storm. They're designed to fail if you don't have good soils. It's just a fact of life. Most of these infiltration things fail eventually. As far as the prevailing setback, we're at 25 feet. The comment was made that the prevailing is 75, so you're pushing the houses 50 feet back. Lot 4601 has about a 60-foot building envelope altogether because of the definition of lot width, that you have to meet it at the back of the house. So we have a variance. We can't build on that lot.
Yeah.
So,
Mr. Cohen wasn't suggesting go back the 75 feet. We understand that would not be feasible just in terms of stormwater management, but maybe push it back somewhat so it doesn't have quite the negative impact on the street that having the houses so close to the street would have, and still be able to handle stormwater in a way that makes sense from an engineering point of view.
Talking about 10 feet or so.
Yeah, 10 or 25, and maybe just. Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Whatever could be done, and still
Right, but I think-
balance these different needs. I know Lee was saying, require something, don't
Yeah,
ask you to
quantify
look
it, I
into
think.
it, but I think in this case, we really do have to ask you to look into it because it's a detailed design consideration. How far back you can move it depends on exactly the pitch of the storm drain, where are your downspouts. It's a detailed engineering issue, so.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I could make another suggestion, which is I think this will be the last one. Maybe take another, give us a couple minutes to see if any of this is viable or not.
Okay.
I mean, would it make sense to, if we agree that lot 4601 more or less has to stay where it is. At the back of that house is at the limit as far as the setback is concerned. If we step back the center house 10 feet, and we step back the third house 20 feet, so that it went from,
Would that work?
so,
I would actually suggest moving back the middle house and leaving the house on the right, because it's heavily forested in the back there. So you want that house to actually be closer to the road, but the one in the middle could actually be pushed back like 25 feet, and then you don't have a little bit of variation. You don't have just the wall of homes right on the road.
all right, 25 is kind of severe. Could come up with
15.
15?
Maybe.
Go ahead, Mrs. Alden.
Well, the definition of a prevailing setback is that the houses be the same distance from the front. And if you're going to have one back here, one here, and one here, you don't have a prevailing setback, and you don't have an aesthetic
Pattern.
good look. I mean, I don't, all it does is push the houses back without giving you the notion of a consistent setback through the neighborhood. I don't think you're going to get it with that one house on lot 4601.
I think I agree with you. I think that, you know, right now the house that's on the triangular lot is actually a little bit further setback than the others to begin with. We're talking about pushing the garage back there, which is maybe going to help a little bit more as well. So that one, even though the rear of the house won't move at all, can be improved to be maybe 15 feet back, you know, from the setback. And then if the other two could be also 15, and I hear what you're saying, Zenon, about the trees in the backyard of the right-hand lot, but hopefully if we just move it 15 feet, it's not that bad. So, you know, if all of them were that 15 feet back from the setback, you know, we're 40 instead of 25, I think that would address your concern, Gail. I mean, I know it's still not the 75 that's in the rest of the neighborhood, but I think it would be an improvement.
Mr. Gazzarli, I don't want to put you on the spot, but can you react to that? Do you think that's feasible from an engineering point of view, or would you need to do some further work, which would be understandable?
Honestly, I'm a little confused as to what the board is looking for.
Well, I think Mr. Cohen's suggestion was you move the two houses in the center and on the right back another 15 feet. And David, is it fair to say that with the change in the design of the house on the left, on the triangular lot, that will be back, that with that change, the house will be set back 40 feet?
That house is less parallel to the road. It's kind of rotated, but, you know, so it doesn't have a consistent setback. But if the garage is moving back, and it's already a little bit further back than the others, I think, you know, it's approximating best case scenario from the board's perspective.
So the house on the lot on the left, whatever that number is, that stays as is, other than we're moving the garage back as we discussed earlier.
That's what I understand David saying.
Correct.
And David, for the other two, would you say have it set back the same as the house on the left, or you want to...
Because those ones are more parallel to the road, you can't really compare it to the house on the left. I think for those two, we're asking for them to be set back about 15 feet more than they are currently. So about 40 feet instead of 25.
So does that work?
So just to be clear about the triangular lot, and that in the effort to move the garage back to the plane of the house, it's a give and take. Part of it, you take the house proper and you're moving it to the side, and then you're pushing the garage back. But to maintain the envelope, which you have in the rear 100-foot width setback, that house will move a little forward. So it's a balance to get one pushing back and another moves forward a little to be flush with it. All within the front setback, but to say at this point that it's meeting exactly where it is probably not the case.
how far forward do you think the main facade of the house would move?
Until I do the layout, but, just to eyeball it, I'd say it's a 50-50 split. The garage goes back a distance of 10 and the house comes forward a distance of 10 to make everything flush on a 20-foot deep garage. And I don't mean to be difficult here, but until it is that I lay it out, it's very difficult to say exactly what it is.
No, I understand. David, do you have a reaction to that?
I'm not going to fight about it. I mean, we could do a design charrette and maybe come up with something that didn't, but, we're getting a lot of what we're asking for. I can live with that.
So then that just leaves us with the other two houses and the suggestion from a member of the board that they be pushed back another 15 feet. And I really don't want to put you on the spot because I understand the complications with respect to stormwater management. But
If we could break for another few minutes.
Okay, 2 minutes, 'cause we do have other
We
applications.
will do our best. Trust me, I have a daughter who's texting me nonstop, when are you picking me up? So I don't want to be here either.
Right. But I really meant that because these are all the things that we need to know before we Okay. Everyone? Come back into session, please.
Okay. With the understanding of what Tim expressed earlier regarding the house on the left and how that's going to change as a result of the garage getting set back and all that, we can take the second house, going from the left, the second and third house. Be specific with the lot number,
702.
For 4701 and 4702, we can move them back 10.
Works for anyone? Jenny?
Oh, I'm the decider?
You're not the decider, just...
I mean, I don't think 10 is enough. Why would I think it should be the prevailing setback.
Okay, great. Anybody else want to say
I'll make a motion.
All right.
Gail Ullman. I move to approve this application as with the conditions that we have agreed to, having to do with the moving the garage back or more in line with the front on the lot 4601, moving the other two houses back 10 feet, which I thank you for anyway, and whatever other conditions that the applicant has agreed to.
I second.
And I'd like to add that we would use the landscape subcommittee if the engineering department agrees to review the landscaping. Anything, any other points?
Well, I didn't mean to be so flip and just say no. I mean, do you honestly think 10 feet is enough? I mean, don't you, what about 20 feet? I just think
10 feet is more than the law requires.
Yeah, we're not, we're going with the ordinance as we have it, and we're asking them to make these concessions. So I think that it really behooves us to look at the ordinances a bit more. Anybody have anything else they'd like to say?
Just regarding the landscape committee's look-see, will that take place before trees are cleared
Well,
or after?
sure, it can. Do you want to put that in?
I would, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, that would be, they would go to the landscape subcommittee before any work is done. Also, they have to get a tree removal permit before any trees, so the arborist will also look at it.
Okay. All right. Now, Gail has made a motion. Did I have a second for that?
I
Okay, seconded. If there are no further comments, would you call the roll?
Ms. Cronmiller?
Yes.
Ms. Capizoli?
Yes.
Mr. Cohn?
Yes.
Mr. Quinn?
Yes.
Mr. Texarney?
Yes.
Mrs. Trotman?
yes.
Mrs. Ullman?
Yes.
Mrs. Gunning?
Yes.
Mr. Williamson?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.